Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
He is an accomplished architect in the New York City metro area, and he's worked on many different projects, business, residential. His name is John Riggio, but we come to learn that that's not all he's done. He was also a tennis pro back in the day, like I'm talking when he was in his 20s, and had played with and alongside some of the greatest players in history. And we're learning more about that as we talk to John. Hey, John, how are you today?
Great. How are you, Steve?
I'm very well, very well. Yeah, some really fascinating stories. Again, I shared with you, I play tennis, I'm just for fun. But all these names that you've mentioned, I remember them from back in the day. Like all these names, they're huge. And you played along with them. You have a story about a stadium as well, right?
Yes. I haven't talked about it before. I had talked about all my courts, the Court 33, Alley Pond, the Sutton East, and of course before that my high school. And this is another story that when I was at Court 33 and they started renovating the set of courts that were my courts, they put the bleachers, seats around there like they do in all the courts there at the tennis center. What they also did was they really got into renovating the whole tennis center. It was stagnant for a long time, and then they put this whole plan together how they're going to renovate all the buildings, make all kinds of new indoor tennis facilities that they have there now. And with that, they also built 3 small stadiums. And these 3 small stadiums are really like a legend there with the other pro players. They all give me full credit for these 3 stadiums to get constructed to put pressure on it. And then what happened is even at the time there, they had these plans to build the stadiums. And I think one thing about them was with the renovations, my Court 33, they planned to pave over it. And eventually I wasn't there, but they did pave over that area and they made it into truck parking. So at the time, I noticed Ivan Lendl, for instance, had pointed out that they had these plans to phase out the Court 33 because of how they arranged the stadium and the improvements and build the 3 stadiums, and they thought it was wrong. They felt that the local architects that were working on the job didn't really know that I was there. I was important on Court 33, and I was like the catalyst for the improvements. They all felt I was a catalyst for the improvements, and that I really improved the whole tennis center and it's safe. And then what happened is, so from there, over the years, I had talked to the different pro players, and one pro player in particular, Miss Chrissy Everett, which I think is a big name. Everyone knows her. She's the first one to say that she would rather have the 3 stadiums dismantled and put my Court 33 back, because they know that I was the one to really help out the whole tennis center. I was playing there and I had generating money and everything. And so that is one thing about it. Yes, and Chrissy Everett, I knew her really good. I mean, she's a friend of mine. We went out and there's even all kinds of tabloid pictures of us together. Paparazzi was there. Particularly, I don't mind any paparazzi pictures or tabloid pictures. She really didn't like those kind of pictures too much. So that is really the story with those 3 stadiums, and they're still there today. I noticed the area where my courts were, they're now a truck parking. I thought maybe they were predicting I was going to go into like logistics or something, park my truck there or something. But they really were baffled of why they would pave over. I think there was no communication between the tennis center, the players, and whoever was designing the improvements. So that is one thing about like architect and designing. There was no communication. They did not know that those were my courts. They were important. They wanted to keep them right where they were, and that's one thing about those tennis courts. So the Court 33 is no longer at that location. It's paved over. That is really what's happening. So the next story is, I think, another name that is really well known around here is John McEnroe. And since John McEnroe and myself, we had the same sponsor from the pro shop in Hicksville, Mr. Patrick Mulrooney. And so from that time, I think I used to talk to him often. And what happens is with the Core 33 location is really right there at all of the best players get to park right there. So I parked my car there. And like he used to like do things like he used to come over, look through my bag in my car when I just started there, giving me suggestions, and I needed to bring a bottle of water, like a change of clothes, things like that, and all kinds of suggestions, like maybe like get a shoe box and start saving money, in the event I would have to pay to enter into tennis tournaments instead of like my sponsors paying the bill. So those were like some interesting things that he was telling me about. And I think even at that time he was part of like putting like even a porta potty next to my courts. I mean, there was like even funny things like that. So that was really an interesting thing they had.
I just want to jump in because when you say John McEnroe, if I remember correctly, he had a little bit of a temper. I mean, it
Yeah,
was one tennis player that back then that got a little hot-headed. I'm pretty sure it was him. So maybe you saw the good side of him, and maybe, hey, we all get frustrated sometimes, even if
yes, I think on tennis you really have to behave yourself. Yeah, if there was any problem with point scoring or anything like that, you really can't yell and scream. All you're really supposed to do is you can just point out a problem nice and calmly. You can contest a point, and then at worst, at the end of the match, you can then protest the whole match. You can
wow.
protest the whole match. The match can go completely for the other opponent. You would prove that they were cheating, making the calls wrong, that there were calls that were incorrect, and things like that. So yeah, so things like you cannot raise your temper. Yeah, of course, you can get thrown out of the match completely.
But you know what? When I think back, to the temper or whatever transpired on the court, I don't view it as a negative. I view it as he's passionate. That's it. He's got a lot of passion and wants to make sure it's right. And guess what? We remember him. It's clear in my mind. I'm fascinated by the other side where he's being like making suggestions for you. It's kind of fun, put a porta potty on the court. Like just it's
Yeah,
fun.
but I think at that time he was even telling me that he considered me that I was his brother, because we
Wow.
were both sponsored by the same people, both in Nina. So what happened is, at the time of the '87 U.S. Open, I won the first five, and then the next match, he gave me those racket covers that are shown in the Tony Rocha video. So those two racket covers he gave me as a gift, that I would have nice racket
Wow.
covers that they would be seen on television, and they are on the video. So the
Mm,
advertising did work.
mm.
So that is one thing that happened, and so yeah, I think he was there, and he always did things like stopped off at the my alley pond. He stopped off at the Sutton location. Um, I think yeah, I think the only thing at that point, my sponsors had changed. I had gotten new sponsored and really started moving up. I don't think he was fully aware of my new sponsors. I didn't really tell anyone about them, and but otherwise he was still around, and he was still visiting my locations, because wherever my new tennis center opened, they always used to offer the other pro players to come and play. And in fact, we at the Sutton location, we ended up getting it down to where they have to request an invitation to come and play at the center. It wasn't going to be completely open where everyone could just walk in, and that sort of controlled things. They got a better idea that they knew it was really my tennis center too. That it wasn't just something everyone was just starting to play at, and that is really what was happening there. And
Wow.
I think the next thing that really was going on was before that, in high school, like in my 11th year. So with all the different things I talked about the last time with my school, the national tournament, and then really just also to point out that this story I'm giving, like at this point, it isn't like uh, a low story. This story, I was really the number one player in the U.S. going into the Davis Cup. and they really needed me to play. I mean, this was pretty big. I was also number one player in, I think it was about 84 as a junior going into the US Open. But unfortunately, at that time, I didn't have big enough sponsors to really play. I mean, this is something I started to learn about over the few years, like from 84 to 90. I think it's like 6 years. So I started to get an idea about the big sponsors and everything getting into the matches. But I was number one going into the US Open too, and that's also recorded by my coach, Anthony Cambria. And now, so the spring of 1986, I did have the number one points going into the Davis Cup, and so I was doing excellent. And at the 11th grade, I made a new tennis friend, and her name was Heidi Stanton, and she really helped me out. She helped me out with my club. She helped me out with my pro tennis, the things. And what happened is, she was really rooting for me. We used to play tennis all the time. She was a great friend, and she always was rooting for me. So at this time, also, she even went to the extent once of reserving airplane flight, hotel reservations with her mother, helping and everything like that, laying out some money for me.
Wow.
It was really amazing. She was an amazing help. I mean, this is I didn't put it on my list, but this is really, she was very important, helping me out. And then she even visited over at the Ali Pond. She visited at Court 33, and she went there with our other friend who was on the tennis team, Julie Stein. She was there too, and so everyone played tennis. And then in gratitude that she was really helping me, I had her visit the pro players. So she met some of the pro players on the court, and then they also allowed her to get a chance to become a pro player. They brought out one of the players from the tennis center, a female player, and she played a match with them, and they got an idea if she can make it in the pros. But she didn't make it, but it was a great experience for her. I mean, she got a great gift to have the chance to play to make the pros, and that was really big. And then I think one thing about her too that was really interesting is that she was an Olympic hopeful. She was a hopeful in playing in the Olympic ice skating, and she used to train in the Westbury, Long Island ice skating ring that they have there. And they have an opening that you can make the Olympic trials and things like that. So she was always training there for years, trying to make the ice skating. So she was also had a whole Olympic thing outside of school that she was trying to get into playing. So that was really very interesting. So this was very athletic minded, and she always helped me with those things. I mean, that was
Wow.
really good.
You mentioned before, John, and by the way, we're talking with architect John Riggio, who is in the New York City metro area, but also when he was in his upper teens and 20s, was a tennis pro. You mentioned Davis Cup. Now, I totally remember hearing about the Davis Cup back then. Does it still exist now?
Yes, they still play the Davis Cup. Yes.
Wow. I haven't heard of, like, of
The
course,
Davis
US
Cup is
Open.
really like an Olympics, but it's for pro players. And what happens is at the point when they start the Davis Cup, all the players, instead of just playing just for themselves as individual players, they start to group them together. So at that point, I started to get an idea of the other U.S. players. At the time, there were some players like Lawson Duncan and some other players that we were playing with, and they sort of started to make up the U.S. team. And that is very interesting. So yeah, that is very similar to the Olympics, but it's really for pro players. That's really what the
Got it.
Davis Cup is.
Yeah.
A lot of people like to play the Davis Cup. It's very interesting. To get into the Davis Cup, I had to play a whole national tournament. I played the whole national tournament, went through 4 sections of the tournament, getting large trophies for each one of them, and it was very good. And then placing number 1 to get into the Davis Cup, so that was really good. I
Wow.
think one other point I can make really about the U.S. Tennis Center was very interesting is there was some controversy at the U.S. Tennis Center. One of them was a history of the tennis center sort of not letting certain players just play through the tennis center. It started off with Brian Godfrey. There was the U.S. player
Mm.
Brian Ruffy who, like, if like Vitas Garilas ever heard Brian Ruffy, he would really start to get upset because he started to make a lot of waves, and he even earned his own bubble, which means he made it to number one. And but he
Now,
used to
now
play at
when you
Forest
say
Hills. He ended up playing at Forest Hills, and then what happened is and so by playing at Forest Hills, he knew the whole Australian team. He really got in with the Australian team. So the next player of that was Brad D. Witt. Brad Witt from Australia. He's another one that had his own tennis bubble in Australia. He made it to number one. And he's another one they didn't really want to let him pass through the U.S. Tennis Center either. So when I was there, and they had a problem with the U.S. Open Finals in 1987. The Australian team said they had enough. They had enough evidence, and they went into the tennis center and they took their rating and they got approval and they brought their rating all the way to Australia. So from 1987 on, the Australian team did not have to go back to New York City to the U.S. Tennis Center. They kept it in Australia. And they did this, and they were happy because a lot of people going through the U.S. Tennis Center, they didn't trust them because if someone is trying to stop their playing, I mean, they don't feel safe at all. It was there, so they really did not feel safe at all. So from that year on, I was the third thing with noticing what's going on with the U.S. Tennis Center, and they left altogether. They don't need any ranking anymore through the U.S. Tennis Center. They could do it direct in Australia. That was really what happened there in '87. So there's a lot of big changes going on there, and that in fact didn't stop the construction of the stadiums and anything. I mean, that is the construction of the stadiums and everything was still going good, and my continuing to play was okay with my sponsors. We found our location there in Sutton East, so that everything was going okay.
Now, when you said tennis bubble a couple of times before, John, what's a tennis bubble? I'm not 100% sure.
A tennis bubble is usually this white structure
Okay,
that is supported by air, and it
got it.
goes over maybe six. Sometimes they start off with six courts, but it can extend to any length. They have them very long. The one in Ali Palm is now the longest and largest indoor bubbles in the whole United States. It's very large now. It grew from six, but they kept improving it. So it's very large. But that's what a tennis bubble is. It's
Got it.
usually the white structure and supported by air pressure.
That's what I thought it was, but I would just want to be 100% sure. And you had said that even in a previous time we talked. Is it hard to, when you say you had your own tennis bubble, was it yours? Did they put your name on it, or, the other players that we're talking about?
It really was mine. Since I was able to play to a level that was really ranked number one, I was awarded the tennis bubble, which is typical of some other players, Brian
Wow.
Godfrey and Brad Drewitz from Australia. They both had tennis bubbles. And yeah, but my tennis bubble was good. I was able to keep the tennis bubble. It lasted a long time. I didn't lose the bubble. My playing was really excellent, and it's still there at Sutton East. And that is, so it
Wow.
worked out really good. And of
Th-
course, with the tennis bubble, they always had this building attached to the tennis bubble. That structure is still existing at the two locations also.
Pretty amazing. Now, when you say you had the tennis bubble, does that mean that you had exclusive use of it and you could let whoever you want play underneath it, or it was your name on it?
It had my name on it, but the whole thing was directed. Both of them were directed with New York City. Now I explained the story where we had a supervisor at the Ali Pond bubble, and he kept maintained the door, who's coming and going in it. And the same thing happened. We got a new supervisor at Sutton East, and he was very helpful. That supervisor didn't have any problems. He was doing very good work. And the same thing, he maintained who was coming and going. They were very strict at the Sutton East. We tightened it up a little, where people couldn't just walk in the door anymore. You had to have an appointment to really get into the tennis center. And we had the supervisor there, and he was, of course, another one who had a college education in facility management and things like that. So it was a serious job, and he took care of the whole place. And he always helped me out, gave me advice and things like that. So it was good.
Now, the girl that you mentioned before that was instrumental in helping you along, even make arrangements, travel arrangements with her mom, and also she was a Olympic hopeful. Have you ever
Yes.
had contact with her since? Have you talked to her?
No, I haven't talked to Heidi Stanton since that time. No, I haven't
Wow.
seen her.
Wow. You ever wonder where she's at, what she's up to, if she's even playing tennis anymore?
Yeah, I think the last time I saw her, she was becoming a school teacher. She was doing very good.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I got to ask you, do you truly miss that time when you look back to it? I don't know if we have a tech issue here, but I don't know if you can hear me, John. Do you miss all that tennis excitement from back in the day when you were in your 20s?
Oh yeah, yeah, that was great. That was excellent. That was a lot of fun. It was really good.
So with you right now, you play tennis on a regular basis. Do you ever teach tennis as well?
Yes, I still teach tennis. I have a meetup. It has more than 1,300 members, and the members are growing. And I have 3 events each week. On Wednesday morning, I teach tennis, and then I have 2 other events where we all play tennis, and it's really good. And it's been very successful. There's a lot of people are playing every week and everything, and it's very good. You could find my meetup on the site meetup.com, Central New Jersey Tennis.
Wow. So just anybody could just meet up and come down if they're in that area?
Yes, yes. They all they do is they sign up, RSVP for the event, and then they can show up and play some tennis.
That's amazing. Like if I were close to you, geographically, I would be doing that. I would
Yes.
just even come down to watch you
Yeah.
because I would never play against you because it would be really bad. But even just to watch you on the court and just know, your history and where you came from, John, that's a fascinating story. And knowing all of these names, I don't think there's been one name that I didn't recognize that you mention every time we talk.
Yes.
It's just, I mean, these like Chrissy Everett. I mean, that's another name, and of course John McEnroe, Yvonne Lendl. All of these people were, I don't want to say trailblazers in tennis, although some of them were in some regards in terms of their style. Who was you, if you look back to that time, in terms of their style, maybe their ability, who was your favorite player?
Oh, wow.
Tough one, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I really have to think about it.
Yeah. Well, because they were all so great, I guess, right?
Yeah. I think it ended up Tony Roach helped me the most in the end. Tony
Yeah.
Roach.
So was he a player along with a coach as well?
Yeah. Yes. He was already like in retirement when I played tennis with him, but
Well,
he was sort of like a tennis player and would help the other tennis players, would teach them tennis. Oh yeah, and he gave me a lot of pointers, really helped me move up to where I needed to go. And that was really amazing.
so when I think about it, in terms of your age back then, you were like 18, 19, right around there.
Yeah, yes. That was taking place all through the years. Yeah, I had met Tony Roach years earlier too, back in like 1985 or 1986, and then again like in 1987.
So let's
So I was 19 years old in 87.
You were 19. Okay, so John McEnroe, how old do you think he was, approximately
He's
back
10
then?
years older than me.
He was. Oh,
Yes.
wow. Okay. Huh. Interesting. So when I think back to that time, I think of him even being a little bit older, but wow. Yeah, that's pretty wild and exciting. Huh. It ended at about what year in terms of tennis for you on the pro side?
I was approaching 1990, heading into the next presidential election. I
Okay.
remember that.
And you did get to play at the US Open.
Yes, I did. I won the first 5 games of the 87 US Open. Yes.
That's amazing. Had
It
you
was on
ever
television. I think the last of the 5 was against Mats Wilander. It was
Mm.
televised. My girlfriend there was paid and was watching the match, and it was on television, and there was a lot of fans around. It was hundreds of people around, all cheering crazy. It was amazing.
Wow.
Even McEnroe was there, watched at the end. He was there sitting there watching me win the match, and it was amazing.
Like super exciting. Just thinking back when I was a teen of that age, I can't imagine what it was like to be internationally known like that. It's just that doesn't happen often, but that only happens because you had the talent back then.
And one new update, I was told by a couple players that they saw me on some billboards in different parts of the world.
Wow.
I was advertised as a great tennis player on a billboard, the old-fashioned billboard they put on the side of the road.
Unbelievable.
I mean, there's no way to make something like that up, and that was really amazing.
Yeah, and even now, if you're on a billboard, it's a big deal. But even back then, there was no social media, internet, nothing like that. So that kind of traditional media, that was even bigger back then. Geez, just to show you the magnitude of that. Yeah, John, always fascinating talking with you. And I just want to tell everybody, on the architect side, John Riggio, RIGGIO.com. I think I remember you put some tennis content on your website, right?
Yes, I do. I have a web page, and it shows a whole list of all my tennis playing. I've been updating it, adding information as I talk here on the podcast, and it's getting longer and longer with a lot of good information of the history of my tennis playing.
Yeah, very exciting. And what a history. John, always a pleasure talking with you. And even at the very least, hearing these names and you connected to them and what they meant in the sports world back then, just huge. And I look forward next time we get together, John, to learn more.
Great. Thanks. Nice talking with you, Steve.
You too, John. JohnRiggio.com, RIGGIO, and we'll be right back.
Hello, my name is John Riggio. I'm the CEO of John Riggio, RA Architect, LLC. I provide architect services in the New York City metropolitan area. That includes New York City, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. My areas are specifically Long Island, the 5 boroughs of New York City, Westchester, Yonkers. In New Jersey, it is North Jersey, Central Jersey, and South Jersey. In Philadelphia, the areas are the Philadelphia metropolitan area. You can find out more information about my company at www.johnriggio.com. That's spelled JohnRiggio.com. And there you will find out a description of my work. It shows a portfolio, pictures of the different job types. And I also have my contact information there. It shows my business address. From there, you can contact me and we can discuss your project. First, we will make an initial consultation. And then from there, we will then go over designing your project and then constructing your project. So I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.